Hello, people. Today I'm talking about how to determine whether someone is an introvert or an extrovert based on their birth chart. Now, astrology doesn't really explicitly talk about introversion and extroversion like other personality systems do. There's a place for it in Myers-Briggs. You know, you're either an ESTJ or an ISTJ, for example. It's one of the four polarities in personality types. In Big Five personality traits, extroversion is one of the five cardinal personality traits. And after a self-assessment, you get a percentile score on trait extroversion. So in that conception, introversion is kind of just a lack of extroversion, just like darkness is the lack of light and coldness is a lack of heat. They don't really have intrinsic characteristics on their own. People don't have the characteristic of being introverted necessarily, according to Big Five. In general, that's arguable, right? And also, it's arguable about how much Big Five can account for when it comes to personality traits, obviously, because you're relying on self-assessment to give yourself information about yourself for the purpose of becoming more self-aware. Well, you need a certain degree of self-awareness to accurately answer the questions in the assessment to begin with. So it's kind of a catch-22, like how much are you actually helping yourself if the degree of accuracy of the results is in large part dependent on your pre-existing self-awareness, you know. So that's one of the problems I have with Big Five and other personality systems in which you take a self-assessment in order to gain a result, whereas your astrological birth chart is just there. You don't have a choice about how it turns out. It is what it is from the time of your birth. And it turns out that we are more nature than nurture, and we have lots of psychological predispositions that we're more or less stuck with throughout our lives, regardless of how it is that our life experiences transpire and affect us. And we also still have the free will to choose to respond to our environment how we choose. And the greater your self-awareness, the more courageously and forthrightly you can express your free will, I think. So that's where the value of astrology and other personality systems really comes in, right? But anyway, we're talking about introversion and extroversion today. And in the birth chart, and it's not super straightforward like a black and white issue, nor is it a straightforward black and white issue whether or not someone is an extrovert or if they're an introvert. Okay, there are many factors that can affect this overall trait. And of course, everyone has, even if they're the most introverted of all introverts, they still may have some parts of themselves that are outgoing, that are extroverted, that are trying to exert energy rather than conserve it. And that's really the difference between an introvert and an extrovert on the whole is, you know, Big Five wise, you're going to fall above that 50th percentile line in extroversion if you, generally speaking, in more cases than not, are likely to exert your energy rather than conserve it. Introverts under the 50th percentile are more likely to conserve their energy more often than not in more situations, okay? But whichever areas of life it is that we're talking about exactly, there may be astrological factors to suggest that in these kinds of scenarios, a person is more likely to conserve energy, even though overall they're more extroverted, okay? So I'm going to be looking at all the factors that I came up with, at least on the back of an envelope. And we're going to be going through a few charts to give examples of how how it is that people are really complex and have both introverted and extroverted qualities. But generally speaking, people tend to lean one way or the other. And so I have some example charts of introverts, example charts of extroverts, and then I have two example charts of true ambiverts, people who are like right at that 50th percentile overall. And there are astrological factors that show that these two people can't really consider themselves more introverted or extroverted. They really are. They really have an equal share of both qualities. Okay. So the first thing is I want to kind of redefine duplicity in astrology. Okay, I'm going to do a little screen share here. Open this. So duplicity is a way of dividing all of the signs into two categories. Okay, hence the word duplicity. Okay, meaning two. And you'll hear some people call this feminine versus masculine. I don't like to use those words because they're counterexamples to that. Libra is an air sign, so it's thought of as a masculine. The masculine elements point upward. Okay, they are pointing upward and outward. Have to have a grounding, right? This large, this wide base at the bottom of the triangle, and then everything's kind of pointing upward, signifying external. Okay, Earth is pointing downward. It's more about and water as well. It's more about grounding, containing. Earth grounds. Water needs a container. It fills things up, up whatever existing container is there. So the feminine signs are more grounding. You think Earth like Mother Nature, water, intuition, emotion, fills a container. That's more of like a feminine quality, generally speaking, but we all have all of the elements in one way or another, even if it's not explicitly represented in our chart. Okay, but I don't like to use the masculine feminine terms to describe these duplicities. They're quite loaded, and there are obviously counterexamples. Libra, for example, is thought of as a masculine sign because it's an air sign, but it's the ruling sign of Venus, co-ruling sign of Venus. And if you've ever met Libra type people, overall, it's quite a feminine energy. Okay, Capricorn, Earth, so thought of as a feminine sign, but Capricorn really, in many ways, embodies paternity in the zodiac. It's the daddy of the zodiacal wheel. Capricorn is masculine in its expressions of being very rational, logical, very linear in the way that it thinks about things. Okay, so because there are obvious counterexamples to that, and also the words feminine and masculine on the whole are just very loaded, I don't use those to describe the duplicities. Okay, I have always used extroverted and introverted. Okay, the air signs and fire signs, the upward pointing symbols, being extroverted. Okay, external, outward, expansive. Okay, earth, water, more downward facing, grounding. Okay, introverted, inward, pointing down and in. Okay, and we can very clearly observe this in the expressions of the signs. Okay, remember, signs are styles of personality expression. They're our swagger. You know, they deal with how we manage our energy. And air and fire is putting out more energy by the nature of what they are. Earth and water are not putting out energy. They are containing energy. They're trying to conserve. Natural selection is a very yin sort of, at least in terms of nature, not in terms of human competition. That would be more of a, astrologically masculine. Air, fire are more combative, are more competitive, are more inspiring. Earth and water are trying to contain their energy. They're trying to conserve. Mother Nature is trying to conserve herself. Okay. So earth and water are the tangible forms that nature takes, as we can observe. So clearly, fire and air are more extroverted, and earth and water are more introverted styles of personality. And we can see this anytime like sun signs of two people get together who are both introverted or both extroverted. We see the effect of that, right? So a Cancer and a Taurus person, when they hang out, they're usually on the same page. That creates a sextile aspect. Okay, it's a 60-degree relationship between those two signs, and if those two people's suns are within that 60-degree range or thereabouts, there is going to be a very large amount of coherence in terms of how the shared energy between those two people is being managed. So, for example, if there's a Cancer and a Taurus dating on any given night, they're pretty much always in agreement about whether to go out and do something or whether to stay in and just chill, Whereas if a Taurus is going out with a Libra, there may not be that mutual agreement, because they're made of different stuff. One's more introverted, one's more extroverted. Okay. Just using sun signs as an example. Of course, there are going to be exceptions to this, but so you see what I mean? Extroverted, upward, outward, air, fire. Introverted, inward, earth, water. Okay. Let me stretch this out a little bit. Y'all can see me. So you can see me. Maybe you don't want to see me. In which case, you can go somewhere. So let me pull up my first example chart. With that in mind, just the play of the elements. Okay, we can observe this chart. So this is really the first thing I want someone to look at when we're talking about how to determine introversion, extroversion in a birth chart. Of course, it's not super simple, but if we're going to take sign distribution to be one of the leading one of the leading factors at play when we're trying to look at this trait, it makes sense to go down to the bottom over here. Why is this not fucking okay? Christ. Patience, please. So we go down to the bottom right of the chart. I'm on astro.com. Right. No, I can't zoom in. always fucking something. This is as good as it's going to be. All right. Bottom right, okay, of the chart on astro.com. I'm just using Astro because it's a popular one. Also have solar fire. We're looking at personality expressions, look at inner planets, okay? Sun, moon. You can include the ascendant in that. Mercury, Venus, Mars. All right. Those are your personality planets. Those are the planets that are putting out the most consciously. Those are the ones people see the most. The outer planets really deal more with karmic baggage. They deal with more subconscious and unconscious proclivities and motivations and phases of life. Okay. They're slow moving. They're not as personal, right? But when it comes to personality expression, the inner planets are really what people see in varying circumstances. Okay. So this person, we can observe fire, air, earth, water, is one of my good friends. I don't think he'll mind if I use his chart. All of his personal planets are in fire and air signs. Okay. I'm going to talk about some other balancing factors that are not linked to signage necessarily that can sort of invert the chart. If somebody looks extroverted, if they have this like one thing in their chart to kind of ground them, then they could come off very much as an introvert. Okay. But this dude has his big three in air signs. He has basically a non-aspected grand trine among his big three: Ascendant in Gemini, Sun in Libra, Moon in Aquarius. Those are extroverted signs. Okay, they're all air. So his big three. Mercury is in Libra as well. Venus is in Leo, extroverted. Mars is in Aries. Okay. Moon, ascendant, Saturn, Jupiter. Okay. This guy is an extrovert. All right. All other factors that I'm about to describe aside, this dude is an extrovert. All of his personal planets are in extroverted signs, air and fire. So it's pretty much unanimous. Okay. But other factors that I do want to point out that we will be looking at here are overall hemispheres. Okay, so the upper half, the upper hemisphere of the chart is the outer world. It signifies where your energy is going. Whereas the bottom half of the chart, the bottom hemisphere below the ascendant descendant axis, is about where your energy comes from, where and how it is contained. Look at the center point on the bottom hemisphere of the chart, which represents home and grounding and lineage and ancestry, the cusp of the fourth house, the IC, that deals with where you're coming from, where you come from, where your energy is grounded, where it originates, origin. Okay. Midheaven, the center point of the top hemisphere of the chart, signifies where you're going. It is the peak of your personal potential and your personal mountain of achievement. It represents your potential. Okay. It's what you're striving toward, you know. So if someone is has their midheaven in Cancer, they are striving in a very basic way, you know, without regard for other variables. They're striving to become more nurturing. They're striving to become some sort of caretaker, you know, for example. Another factor we can look at is, do you have a day chart or a night chart? So I'm talking about the concept of sect in Hellenistic astrology, traditional astrology. That's kind of making a comeback through people like the guys who run the astrology podcast and stuff like that. But whether you're a day or night chart very simply is determined by whether you were born at night or during the day. So if your sun is below the ascendant descendant axis, was below the horizon at the time of your birth, that means you're a night baby. You were born, before the sun came up or after the sun went down at some point during the night. And the luminary that's associated with that is the moon. It means that you're a little more moon oriented than sun oriented overall, again, depending on other factors in the chart, it may not carry a whole lot of weight, that factor alone. But again, this is just one factor that we're using to contribute to the quest to decide whether someone is an introvert or an extrovert overall. Okay. And simply speaking, if you're born sometime at night, if you're born as a night baby, and the moon is the main luminary that is slightly more important in your chart. Again, depends on aspects to the luminaries as well. I'm an aspect guy. You're going to be more introverted than extroverted, all other things being equal. Okay. If you're born during the day, the sun in your chart is above the horizon, above the ascendant descendant line. You're more exerting of your energy. You're going to tend toward extroversion a bit more. Okay. But again, there are other factors that we need to consider. If you're a day baby, but all of your personal planets are in yin signs or introverted signs, earth and water, then you're probably going to be an introvert. Okay. So again, no one factor determines the general truth of the matter we're discussing right now. Okay. Look at also the corresponding benefics and malefics that are associated with being a day baby or a night baby. Okay. So if you're a day baby, the Jupiter is your stronger benefic and Mars is your stronger malefic planet. If you're a night baby, Saturn is your stronger malefic planet and Venus is your stronger benefic planet. So look at the placements of those, what houses they're in. Are those planets above or below the horizon? And what signs are they in? Are they in a yin sign or a yang sign, introverted or extroverted sign? Okay. Look at your ascendant sign. Your ascendant is a part of yourself. I struggle to even say that it's really a part of yourself because you can't control it. It's what you unconsciously project. It is your sense of style. It's your physical appearance. It is what you are projecting to the world before you break the ice with your environment. It's the self that you can't help but to be in unfamiliar situations. So, if there's a lot of contrast between your ascendant and the rest of your personality, people are generally surprised about how you are once they break the ice with you. So if you're let's say a Pisces rising person, you're likely to be introverted, or a Scorpio rising, water sign, you're likely to have an introverted shell or mask that you wear in unfamiliar situations. But maybe you're all air and fire underneath in all of your personal planets. And so once people break the ice with you and get to know you a little bit, you really come out of your shell and you're like, boom, all air and fire. I'm like, whoa, you're a lot more extroverted than I thought you were at first. Right. So ascendant is really just that first layer. But the other thing that's attached to the ascendant is your chart ruling planet. And again, it's going to vary in importance depending on how it's aspected to the other planets, what sign it is in, what house it is in, how strong that chart ruling planet actually is. But there's a planet associated with each sign. And whatever sign your ascendant is in, look at the ruling planet that corresponds to that sign. So for, Scorpio, it's Pluto. For Aries, it's Mars. For Taurus, it's Venus. Okay. For Capricorn, it's Saturn. Okay. Look at where that planet is placed, what sign it's in, what role it's playing in the whole of the chart. Okay. And do those factors say introverted or extroverted. Okay, tally that up, add that to the list of things that are contributing to our determination here. Another thing, angular planets overall. Someone who has lots of action around the angles, especially the ascendant and the midheaven, those planets are going to be more conscious for the person, right? What are the qualities of those specific planets on the angles that are being unconsciously shown to the world without the person's consent, all right? Are they more introverted planets? Are they darker planets? Are they the moon, Pluto, outer planets in general? Okay. Or is it Mars? Is it Venus? Those things are going to be more visible in the personality. So look at what sign it's in. If you have Venus in an extroverted sign on your ascendant, also in an extroverted sign, you're going to have this very outwardly social personality, very maybe a sort of soft, sensitive personality, depending on what sign it's in. Okay, but someone who's really putting the comfort and the the well-being of other people first, right? So they are naturally going to exert a lot of energy. Jupiter on the ascendant or Jupiter on the midheaven. Okay, there's a lot of fortune, a lot of good luck, a lot of abundance that's tied in with the person's appearance, how they come off to people. They're going to be quite an inspiring figure to their friends, to their coworkers. Okay, they're going to be giving away a lot, and they have the energy to do that. Jupiter on the ascendant or the midheaven. Okay, so what sign is that in? If it's in Scorpio or Virgo or something, then that person may be very outwardly expressive in certain ways, but there's still going to be a quality of conserving at the same time, having to deal with the fact that there's someone who is putting out a lot, but if it's in an introverted sign, that they have to learn to contain themselves and manage their energy in a way that they're not giving themselves away entirely, or else they won't have anything left over for themselves, because introverted signs have to ground themselves. All right. So look at angular planets and angular houses, planets in angular houses. So the first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th, but mostly the first and the 7th and the 10th. The fourth house is more introverted. Okay. The person, somebody with a fourth house stellium, lots of action going on around the IC, is going to be very concerned with home, with staying in. They're going to be concerned with their lineage, with their ancestry. They're going to be very involved in family matters. Okay. And they're going to want to conserve and contain as to protect their family and give their family a grounding. Okay. So it's really more of an introverted, sort of maternal introverted thing that's happening when you have planets in the fourth house. It's kind of Cancerian, right? But planets in the other angular houses generally point to outward exertion of energy. Okay. In the first house, it's all about me. The person is going to have a very large ego. 7th house, it's all about other people. Let me give. Okay. 10th house, it's all about ascending. Okay. It's all about moving up in life. It's all about achieving, accomplishing things, hard work. Okay. So people who have angular planets, and again, depending on the signs they're in, is it extroverted or introverted signs, it's going to, at the very least, whether it's introverted or extroverted, angular house placements point at a strong, visible personality. Okay. Which can equate to extroversion, right? Depending on how the energies are managed. So look at the sun. We don't want to leave the sun out here. Okay. The sun is your energy source itself. Okay. People who have extroverted sun signs are, they seem to have more vitality. It's not that they do necessarily, because they can certainly wear themselves out by putting out too much, but they are sort of always on the go. Okay. It's a very general trait, duplicity trait that I'm talking about here. All right. It's not the end all be all. Introverted sun signs are more conservative with their energy overall, because your sun represents your ego identity, your sense of self, and where your energy is coming from, more or less. Okay. Look at the aspects to the sun. Okay. If you have squares to the sun, squares to the sun indicate that if your sun is in an introverted sign, that other planet it's in contention with is going to be in an extroverted sign, or vice versa. So if you have like sun square moon, those are two very integral parts to your personality, obviously. So you're going to have a sort of butting of heads kind of conflict between your ego identity and your energy source, and then your need for emotional and mental security, space, support, and grounding, okay, within yourself. So that's a hard aspect to deal with, sun square moon. But what it implies is that really, arguably, the two major parts of your personality, the two most important parts of your personality, are split between a yin sign and a yang sign, an introverted sign, an extroverted sign, right? So it causes typically at least early onset depression, like earlier in life, but it's an aspect that people can really grow out of. And I've seen just some of the most profound identity transformation in people who have sun square moon. It's, in one sense, it's because they've learned to balance their introverted tendencies with their extroverted tendencies. They've learned how to get the best of both worlds, right? So look at aspects to the sun. Major hard aspects to the sun are going to be, when it comes to introversion and extroversion, a square to the sun is going to be pulling your identity and your energy source in the other direction, right? And in general, squares, depending on what else is going on in the chart and what aspects are happening with the planet that's square to the sun, this may be one of the causes of ambiversion, someone who is not more introverted or more extroverted, but has a solid balance of those two things, and which would make sense, and we do see this in more people than not, in one way or another, that someone who's very introverted growing up learns to come out of their shell more as they mature, and they're more likely to sort of catch a second wind in life and have like a late childhood in life. Whereas somebody who's really extroverted early in life has like sort of a stereotypical childhood, learns to just kind of chill out and spend time alone and appreciate their time alone more as they get older. All right. But it's more consciously apparent with people who have sun square moon. That's what I'm getting at. And sun square to other personal planets. Another thing to look at are aspect patterns in which one planet is maybe on the opposite side of the chart. Maybe you have all of your personal planets on the top half of the chart, and then there's one integral planet in the bottom half that's connected to all of those planets, which kind of just inverts the chart with regard to introversion and extroversion. So somebody who has most of their planets floating around the midheaven at the top of the chart is going to be more extroverted, generally speaking. But if their chart ruling planet is Venus, and Venus is in a trine aspect with all of those planets in the top half of the chart, then, and Venus is also, say, in an extroverted sign, an air or fire sign, then it's going to kind of flip the emphasis from extroversion to introversion. Okay, if Venus is in like a more introverted sign, I think. So yeah, it depends on what the individual needs as well, how they've managed their environmental influence to this point in their life, you know, what they've been through, really. Like maybe there's a very Venusian person who's very extroverted and social, and they have a strong Saturn deficiency, okay, which is often the case with people who have a really strong Venus, because Venus and Saturn are very, very different. And I wouldn't even say that they're complements at all. They represent very different things, but not to get too caught up in the details. You know, Venus has something that someone who's very Saturnian is naturally going to lack. And a very Venusian person is going to lack what Saturn has, you know, boundaries and self-governance, say, because Venus is all about like pleasure and what you want, not necessarily what you need, you know. So look at the interplay, the relationships between the planets, which planets are stronger, which ones are weaker, what does the person need? And the thing that the person needs that they're not consciously expressing is the thing that's going to be unconsciously bubbling up from the surface and influencing the personality in unconscious ways, you know. So if you're very like kind of a surface socialite, and you know, people never really question your motives behind things, you have like a really bright, outwardly expressive personality, let's say like a female who is all air and fire, right? And doesn't really have any like water or earth, anything to ground itself. They may have like very pure intentions to love, intentions to inspire, intentions to participate, but they may be very deficient when it comes to realizing what their own darkness is. What are the deeper parts of themselves? Pluto could be playing a deep role in their relationships. Pluto, even Saturn, the more karmic outward planets, could be playing a role in how that person is unconsciously motivated. And so someone who is like all kind of one-dimensional in life is obviously going to be lacking something in equal or greater value that is naturally polar to those personality traits that they're expressing. You know, that's why the birth chart is represented in the shape of a wheel. And every sign has its opposite sign, where if you place too much emphasis on one, the opposite is going to unconsciously manifest. If you have a lot of emphasis in one house of your chart and nothing in the opposite house, and that opposite house is not being attended to, which it may not, because it's easy to forget about things that we don't have conscious sight of, that opposite house in a polaristic way is kind of going to be unconsciously influencing the personalities, motivations and whatnot. Okay. So another thing to consider when we're talking about introversion and extroversion, who are you talking about? Is it you? Is it one of your friends' charts you're looking at? Consider the context in which you know the person and how well you know them. You know, maybe you have this friend and you think that they're an extrovert because they're extroverted around you. But around you, they're only expressing their Venus and their Mercury, which are in air signs. Let's say they have a conjunction there in Gemini, okay? But the rest of their chart might be pretty dark, okay? But you're maybe that conjunction happens in fifth house, okay? And so you guys have a shared hobby. And that's how you know the person. And you see that person as an extrovert, because fifth house is about hobbies and fun and leisurely time, things like that. And Gemini is an extroverted sign and an outgoing one. Okay. But let's say the rest of their planets are in, you know, Capricorn in the 12th house. All right. That's probably going to be a dark person. 12th house is a dark place. Capricorn is a dark sign. It's sort of like, the dark masculine, we could say. So there's going to be a side to that person that's a lot deeper than what the fifth house allows you to see, right? So you may judge them based on the fact that you only know them because you share a hobby together. You may judge them as an extrovert when really, when you look at their chart, there's all this like introverted stuff going on. Okay. So I'm gonna pull up some of the charts. So this is the one I showed you earlier. Clearly an extrovert. Okay. All his personal planets are in air and fire signs, which means that they're conversely, though, there's balance in all things. Okay. His outer planets are in introverted signs. So there's a part to him, there's an entire half to him that is introverted that he's just now tapping into with age, with maturity. Okay. And it's great to see someone who growing up was so extroverted, so like masculine in certain ways that we'll say are not so good. Okay. We think of like the tyrannical masculine archetype as someone who's all air and fire, the tyrannical masculine type. Okay. This is maybe one reason we associate masculinity with air and fire and femininity with earth and water, because when we push those duplicities to their extremes, what does that look like? For air and fire, it's just absolute blood and torture. It's outwardly tyrannical, right? It's physically tyrannical. Air erodes rock, fire burns earth. Okay. Raping and pillaging, tyrannical masculine. What does the tyrannical feminine look like? Psychologically dominating, right? Water also erodes earth. Earthquake. It's an eruption from within the core of the earth. Okay. Earth is a feminine sign, introverted sign. Unmediated, unregulated masculinity, i.e., air and fire, is outwardly tyrannical. Unmediated, unregulated feminine tyranny is inwardly destructive, psychologically destructive, manipulative, dishonest. Okay. So this dude's an extrovert based on the sign stuff alone that we talked about. Let's look at this next one. This is the chart of an introvert. Okay. So her ascendant is in an extroverted sign. Even her sun is in an extroverted sign in Leo. But look at all these planets. All of her personal planets are in the bottom half of the chart. Okay. So when you have like 100% of something going on in one of these categories that I've described that we can use to determine introversion or extroversion, generally speaking, you can use that as a tool for determining with reasonable certainty that the person's an introvert or an extrovert. So this person, 100% of his inner planets are in extroverted signs, making him an extrovert. This person, 100% of her inner planets are in the bottom half of the chart, the bottom hemisphere of the chart, indicating an introvert. And she's a night baby as well. Sun is one of the inner planets, we'll say, is below the horizon. Okay. Pretty equal share between introverted and extroverted signs within this bottom half of the chart, but nevertheless, they're all in the bottom half of the chart, which indicates introversion. And so it kind of tips it in that direction. Okay. What do we have next? This is another introvert. Okay. Why? So look at the ascendant. The ascendant is right on the cusp of Cancer. It's actually in the 29th degree of Gemini. So this person's a true cusp, a true ascendant cusp. But as let's say it's Gemini, because it is still in the sign of Gemini. Okay. Chart ruler, Mercury, in an introverted sign in the 4th house near the IC. Conjunct the sun, night baby, sun also in the 4th house, tight conjunction in an introverted sign, Virgo, introverted house. Okay. Mercury is also in its other sign of co-rulership. All right. Venus conjunct Mars in the bottom half of the chart, although they're both in Leo, and there is a fire about this person. This is my cousin's wife. Moon. She's more moon oriented because she's a night baby, right? Moon's in an introverted sign, Capricorn. In a trine aspect, look at aspects of especially the main luminary, okay? Whether it's, moon, night baby, sun, day baby. Trine, sun and Mercury conjunction, trine, main luminary, moon, both in introverted signs, both in earth. She's very earthy, okay? Yeah, this is an introvert. All things considered, right? This is my chart. I am an introvert. So when we talk about, upper and bottom halves of the chart, there are kind of two exceptions to this rule in general. You could say 5th house is pretty extroverted, but it depends what's actually going on there. What sign is on the cusp of your 5th house. Some people would like to think that 8th house is introverted. I totally disagree with that. It's very extroverted. Why? Because it's about other people's resources, other people's money, other people's shit. It's extroverted because you're outsourcing your concerns. Okay. Extroversion, outsourcing energy. Okay. 12th house, 1st house are the exceptions that I'm going to talk about. 12th house is a very private world. 1st house is a very private world in its own way. 1st house is visible because the ascendant is the cusp of the 1st house. So somebody with 1st house stellium is all about themselves. They're very egotistical and they outsource their energy to other people in order to gain affirmation and validation from them. Okay. 12th house person does not outsource in that way, contains everything, deals with it on their own. It can lead someone to serious depression and mental illness, but nevertheless, everything is very self-contained. So 1st house is self-absorbed, self-absorption. 12th house is self-containment. All right, that's the major difference here. So a 1st house heavy person, even though it's below the horizon, will very much tend toward extroversion, depending on the sign. 12th house heavy person will very much tend toward introversion because it is the collective unconscious. And when you are 12th house heavy, you have a perspective of universality in all things. And when you have such a broad perspective on things, especially if you have like outer planets and the moon, like I do, what you do is you tend to retreat. You tend to sort of see everything for how it is. And so you're like, okay, that's a lot of shit. I'm going to focus on myself. So you're kind of like forced into introversion because you have a perspective that's very broad. Okay, very 12th house. So I'm an introvert. All my personal planets are below the horizon, with the exception of my moon, which is the main luminary in my chart because I'm a night baby. But it's in the 12th house and it's in an introverted sign. So that's kind of a double whammy when it comes to determining introversion. Pluto on my midheaven. Okay. What I am projecting outwardly is kind of an introverted, and also with my Capricorn ascendant, I'm not very accessible. I'm not very friendly. I don't come off as friendly when you first meet me. Okay. But both of these stelliums are in introverted signs, opposite signs, Cancer and Capricorn, water, earth. I do have these personal planets in extroverted signs, and this is kind of what saves my personality from just being totally dark and depressive and mean, So I have Venus and Gemini in my fifth house, which is about leisure and pleasure and friends and lovers and stuff. So that's a very outgoing, sort of flirty, very personable placement that I have, and Mars in Aries, relating to siblings and communication in the third house. So that's a pretty outgoing part of me as well. But Mars in Aries tends to burn out, if it's overused, especially for someone who's overall introverted. But Ascendant in an introverted sign, my chart ruling planet, Saturn, is on my ascendant in the 12th house in an introverted sign, introverted chart. Moving on, this is an extrovert. So Libra ascendant, which makes Venus the chart ruling planet, whereas Venus up here in Gemini, very outgoing, just like me, but in the 8th house instead of the 5th house, conjunct Mercury. So this person has a proclivity to talk their way into romance, and talk their way into other people's pants and their wallets as well, being in the 8th house. Not shitting on this person. I'm just making a joke here. Okay. Jupiter up there in the top half of the chart, but in an introverted sign. Look at the sun. Sun is in Gemini as well. So you got a lot of personal planets up here. Moon is in an introverted sign, Virgo, but it's in the 11th house. 11th house is very outgoing and needing of a sense of belonging with other people and with loved ones and in the context of humanity in general. So this person gains a lot of comfort from being part of a group, very group oriented. All right. Very community oriented. And so that's it. The only personal planet, inner planet in this chart is Mars, and that is down here in the 5th house in an introverted sign. Interestingly enough, but Mars is conjunct the North Node, and that is a very consciously purpose-seeking conjunction, right? So that person is really going to go after what they want and need more than someone who would have Mars in Pisces not conjunct the North Node. So that's what I mean by aspects. Look at the aspects and what are the aspects doing. Mars in Pisces, not a super strong placement, but when you throw the North Node, that person's like sole purpose into the mix, that person is going to be very ambitious in terms of like putting projects into action, especially creative projects, because 5th house is about creativity, right? So this is an extrovert for sure. Don't want to do that one yet. Don't want to do that one yet. Don't want to do that one yet. Let's look at this one. This is like the next one. So now we're starting to get into the charts that are a little more complicated. Okay. This chart you might immediately think is that one of an introvert. Okay, but this is where signs really come into play and where they become super important when it comes to determining introversion and extroversion. All right. So this is my dad, by the way. So his ascendant is in an extroverted sign, Gemini. Chart. He's a night baby. Okay, but his sun is in an extroverted sign in the 5th house, which is quite an outgoing place, even though it's in the bottom half of the chart. Chart ruler. Mercury near the 5th house cusp. It's in Virgo. It's in an introverted sign. But look at this stellium right here. It is being dragged into the 5th house of Libra. okay, where this Libra stellium is. The sun, Venus, carrying a lot of weight here, okay? And the chart ruling planet, Mercury, as well as Saturn, the person's sense of discipline, is being kind of dragged into the energy of Libra and into the fifth house, even though it's in the bottom half of the chart, and even though the chart ruling planet is in is technically in the fourth house and in an introverted sign, it can't help but to be influenced by this more extroverted stellium right here, a stellium of planets in an extroverted sign, which is trine, look at aspects, okay, trine to the ascendant in an extroverted sign, okay? So these factors of signage and aspects are starting to outweigh the hemisphere factor of introversion that would be suggested by the fact that most of the planets are in the bottom half of the chart and he's a night baby, okay? Also, Sun and Neptune trine to the midheaven in Aquarius, also an extroverted sign, okay? Jupiter in Aquarius conjunct the midheaven. Remember what I said about planets on the angles, especially the midheaven, especially one like Jupiter. I think I mentioned that one specifically. If you have Jupiter on the ascendant or the midheaven, that's going to strongly indicate extroversion, okay? So although my dad has become more reclusive with old age, we don't call him Wild Bill for nothing. He is mostly extroverted when both we look at the chart balances of elements, as well as overall, temperament, like what you get when you're around him. You get these projections of personality, this air stuff. Also a conscious projection of personality through his sun in Libra, which is also an air sign and also extroverted, okay? So this is one of those kind of tricky ones. Also his moon is in Leo, very inspiring, loving, big-hearted person, okay? And being in the third house, the third house can make him very expressive of that inner warmth, okay, through speech and communication with others. So this is an extrovert, even though it kind of looks like an introverted chart on the surface. You see how we're going deeper here. This is a chart that can be a little deceiving. All right, you immediately think that it's an extrovert, right? Even when we look at the balances, there's a little more going on in the extroverted signs, and there's much more going on in the upper half of the chart, the upper hemisphere of the chart. Sun on the midheaven in a fire sign, okay? This is quite extroverted, right? But this person identifies as an INFP in Myers-Briggs. Now, in Myers-Briggs puts everything into a dichotomy, okay? It's not the end-all, be-all. Again, no one's 100% introverted, 100% extroverted, okay? Hold on, let me let this cat in. Get in here. But what have we got? So Jupiter, I'm sorry, Neptune is the chart ruling planet, Pisces ascendant. All right, that's in an introverted sign. Conjunct Jupiter, also in an introverted sign, okay, in Capricorn. But look at the aspects to, so this doesn't look like a very Saturnian chart, right? But when you come down here and you look at Saturn. Saturn's in the first house, in Aries. An Aries Saturn person is going to formulate rules and principles around in sort of a competitive fashion, we'll say, in an Aryan fashion, is going to take a sort of combative, um, authoritarian approach to making or breaking the rules. Okay. So we have to look at the aspects, like how is this affecting the overall chart when Saturn in Aries is conjunct K2, conjunct the South Node, by the way. But Saturn is the only real planet in the bottom half of the chart. Well, we can observe that it's very heavily aspected to several personal planets and important planets. Has a sextile to chart ruler Neptune and also to Uranus, which is in a conjunction with that. Okay. Has trine to Pluto. It has an opposition to the North Node and has a hard square to Mercury. And Mercury is in an introverted sign. Mercury is in Capricorn. Okay. So Saturn is a karmic planet. Okay. When Saturn is in a way opposed, not in opposition with, an aspect opposition with, but is in some way opposed to all of the other planets in the chart. Now, in this case, it's not all, but it's many of the major personal planets and, the chart ruling planet. Saturn brings the lessons that one simply needs. Okay. And so while this person is very outwardly focused, outwardly expressive, comes off very extroverted, okay, Saturn is bringing a very Aryan, abrupt style of rules and restrictions and lessons, life lessons to this person. And so this is what I was talking about, having a major planet sort of inverting the quality of the chart in general. That's kind of what Saturn is doing right now. Okay. Saturn being in the bottom half of the chart is in that way different from the rest of the chart, which is in the upper half. And so it's kind of taking the person's personality and it's forcing them to look inward more because they're exerting so much outwardly. All right. So for this, like, we could break down the signs of each planet and everything. But really, because of the locomotive style of this chart, everything is sort of connected and moving in one direction, in a sense. And really, Saturn is the engine of the locomotive here, if that makes sense. And it's the only one in its own hemisphere of the chart, meaning that the most general life lessons for this person who normally operates in an external fashion are going to be inverting the person's temperament to look inward. And in fact, this person does have quite a phlegmatic temperament, which is an introverted, sort of watery style of personality. Okay. So Saturn being the only thing in the bottom half of the chart. And again, I said that that first house is kind of more extroverted. Well, it's taking on an introverted role here because of the planet that's in that house. All right. It's taking a very abrupt Aryan approach to forcing the person to turn inward when they're so used to exerting outward. Okay, sun on the midheaven. So this person's kind of an ambivert, okay, but will self-identify as an introvert because of the role of Saturn. Okay. Hope that makes sense. So this is the chart of an ambivert. Okay, someone who is very near 50th percentile in extroversion. Okay, as per Big Five. Now, there are a few things going on here that may tend them toward extroversion, right? Such as Sun on the ascendant in a fire sign on the 0th degree of that sign. Okay. Fresh, raw fire, Sagittarius on the ascendant. Okay. Moon also in a fire sign. So all of the big three, two of them being tightly conjunct, are in fire signs, which are extroverted. Okay. And that moon is in the 9th house, which is a very outwardly big thinking. We had another example of moon and Leo in the 3rd house, directly opposite this, which dealt with expressing themselves through words, through communication, expressing their big-hearted nature in that way. This person does the same thing through big ideas, through higher pursuits, higher learning. Okay. So these are very extroverted qualities. Trine, guy has a grand trine. He's one of my best friends. But look what he's got in the 12th house in an introverted sign, in Scorpio, stellium, Venus, Pluto, Mercury. Okay. Introverted, inward focused house. There's some struggle there. We'll say some inner struggle. Okay. But it's an introverted proclivity nonetheless. This is the thing that kind of tips it in the introverted direction. Okay. Chart ruling planet of Sagittarius, ascendant, is Jupiter, whereas Jupiter in an introverted sign in an introverted house. Okay. Pisces in the 4th house on the IC. All right. Remember, I've had a couple examples already of planets on the angles really making the difference here. Chart ruling planet, big deal. Okay. Also heavily aspected to, big trine to the stellium in the 12th house. That causes a lot of introversion. Square to Saturn. Okay. Square to Chiron. All right. So that's a very introverted combination of things going on right there. But nevertheless, the strength of that is, roughly equal to the fact that his big three are in fire signs and his sun is on the ascendant. Okay, so this is an ambivert. Ambiversion, by the way, is not easy to deal with in the personality. It can be a source of deep inner struggle for people, identity struggle over their identity and whatnot. So I'm going to talk more about him personally. Let's look at one more ambivert situation. Okay. Sun conjunct moon in an introverted sign in the bottom half of the chart. Sun conjunct moon in Taurus. That's a very introverted proclivity right away. Person's expression of energy and vitality is nicely aligned with their inner sense of inner peace and inner identity. And so this person takes a very kind of simple, confident approach to decision making. Okay. Especially when it comes to fun and leisurely activities and kids, whether or not they want kids, what they're going to do about that. 5th house things. Okay. But it's in an introverted sign in Taurus. So this is really a strong introverted part to this person's personality. Okay. Sagittarius ascendant could tip them toward extroversion. Where is Jupiter? Where's the chart ruling planet Jupiter? Look at that, right on the midheaven. So this person attracts a lot of success in work, and they're a very hard worker and able to give a lot. And it's also in an extroverted sign in Libra up here. So this person can give their best in work, and they receive even more from that. Has an opposition though with Venus and Mercury also in extroverted signs. Venus conjunct Mercury, by the way, in an extroverted sign like Leo, like Aries, I'm sorry, especially can make someone very extroverted, very fiery, very fun to be around, very, like cool to hang out with, very like down for whatever, up for whatever, whether they're going up or down, they can switch it up. Okay. So this person has, this pretty tough, but in certain ways, very pleasant extroverted set of oppositions right here. So it kind of tips them in the direction of extroversion in certain ways, in terms of like romance and home life. Like they're probably able to live with people, have roommates. Whereas somebody who had this exact thing in introverted signs, say Cancer and Capricorn, Taurus, Scorpio, would likely not be able to live with people. They'd be very focused in these realms. They'd be very, energy abundant in the contexts of home and work, fourth and, midheaven, respectively. But they'd want to keep those things more private, right? This person doesn't mind living with people, working with people, gaining a lot of abundance in return. Okay. Even though she's got this sun conjunct moon in an introverted sign, leading to a lot of sort of introverted qualities to her personality. So overall, this is an ambivert, just like the last example. So again, introversion and extroversion are not black and white things like Myers-Briggs would have you think. Okay. But again, Myers-Briggs has its own problems. Again, just like Big Five, it has the problem of relying on self-assessment to get results in order to identify someone, whereas an astrological birth chart just is the way it is, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it simply does describe your psychological predispositions. It's that core underlying all of your experiences and your perceptions, okay? So, but also Myers-Briggs kind of falls short because it at least gives people the impression that it puts these personality traits, introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuition, into dichotomies, and that everyone is one thing or the other in each of those dichotomies, when really it's not true. And I hope I've shown today, at the very least, that astrology shows us that we are more complex. Human personality is more complex than that, and that everyone does have qualities to their personality that are both introverted and extroverted. It just depends what contexts we're talking about, what we're doing, how it is we're inspired and energized by ourselves, by our environment, and what area of life we're involved in. And that's what each of the astrological houses shows, is the different areas of life. You could be super fifth house heavy, right? And fifth house is all about friends and leisure and pleasure and dating and stuff like that. But if you don't have anything balancing that out, then you're no less likely than someone who has an empty fifth house to be totally socially awkward. Maybe you have a fifth house stellium in Scorpio, might make you a very sort of like, very in need of having friends and leisurely activities and stuff in your life, but you may have hidden motivations behind those pursuits. So again, personality is very complex, and astrology just does the best way of showing that. And this video was my way of showing that that's the case for one simple personality dimension, and that's extroversion versus introversion. Okay. So I'll probably do this with sensing and intuition, thinking and feeling, judging and perceiving also. There are connections in astrology with those dichotomies. Only astrology gives us much more well-rounded ways of understanding those things that the Myers-Briggs dichotomies point to. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Went a little longer than I expected, but thanks for making it to the end, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.